My name is Hal Daub, and I'm privileged to be a part of this group for many years and to enjoy the friendship with many of you. Actually, on the call, I don't know, but I think maybe Cleta and I go back the furthest in personal relationships of all of us on this call. But I'm pleased to be with you all tonight. Welcome you to the call. And we're going to talk about this upcoming election. It's not very many hours away from now, and we all have different views, so let's share them with each other. But I want to keep it tight and keep everybody on point and concise. I may interrupt you from time to time if you're wandering along the path of eating up too much time and being redundant. But we'll start off, Paul, with you. And I'm not going to call you a never Trumper, but I am going to say that you are a very loyal public servant with a distinguished record. And how do you see this election going, Paul?
Well, I don't do analysis. I listen to what people say, and the last thing I did was listen to a podcast from Morgan Stanley for its private client base, of which I am a member. And the principals in that discussion were Howard Dean and Karl Rove. And the original, I watched a re-recording of it today, but it was I guess it was yesterday or the day before. And it's consistent with what I read and what I hear elsewhere. And at the top of the ticket, they consider it a toss-up. And the evidence they cite for that of the not individual polls, but the average, like what is it, Clear something or other, and the ones that take an average of a whole bunch of polls.
Yeah, Real Clear Politics. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just and Nate Silver and things like that, and the Cook Report and the people who really sort of pay close attention to this stuff consider it a toss-up at the top of the ticket. And I'm not prepared to second guess that.
What if it's a unified Trump House?
Even if it's unified Trump or Harris, it'll be by a small margin, almost certainly.
So what are the foreign policy implications based on your experience?
Oh, geez.
Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah. The foreign policy implications of divided government aren't that great because because the weight of influence is in the White House on foreign policy. And so if the question, then therefore the foreign policy question is a toss-up. If it's Harris, it is probably less pro-Israel in the Middle East. But that would be relative. She's still going to be basically supportive of Israel, but be leaning on him to try to minimize the collateral damage all the way along. Trump on China, I think it's either way. It's not. It's going to be an aggressive anti-China posture either way. On trade, it's going to be protectionist either way. There are relative degrees of that, of course, and I think Trump, in a relative sense, is more protectionist than Harris. But the Democrats are returning to their roots. They've always been the party of protectionism. The Republican Party has recently abandoned its roots because it was historically more or less free trade. I think that on balance, what's liable to happen is sweeping tariffs across the board probably will not happen in either administration. China gets nailed big time either way.
You were a Reagan diplomat, and would that tend to color your thinking about not just?
Actually, I was a diplomat in the Nixon, Ford, Carter, and Reagan administrations.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to Cleta Mitchell. And Cleta, I do have some questions for you, but you probably got Gary's questions in advance, so the floor is yours. Welcome.
Well, thank you. No, I didn't get any questions from Gary. If I did, I missed. But so I'm happy to take your questions.
I have four questions for you, but you could start off by saying in the last week, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that mail-in ballots received after Election Day can't be counted. What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, that case was filed by both the RNC filed a case and and Judicial Watch both filed that case back in January, hoping to get that resolved before this election. And it took a while before the district court ruled, and then the Fifth Circuit took a while. And so, but they've said that the argument before the court was that the Constitution provides for an election day, and that when you have an election that is extended beyond election day, that is violative of the Constitution. And the Fifth Circuit agreed with that, but they stayed the decision because they said that it couldn't affect or impact this year because it was too close to the election. But that would be very meaningful going forward. I posted today, we have a website. I hope you'll look at it, actually. It's called votefair2024.com, votefair2024.com. And we put that up in order for people who, those of you who are from Nebraska, you're used to ballot issues. But there are many states this year who have ballot issues. And many have been put on the ballot they've been referenda, referred by the legislatures, or they've been put on the ballot by the initiative petition where citizens circulate petitions. And there are a number of those ballot issues that impact elections. So if you'll look at that, that's why we originally put that up there. And it explains each of the ballot issues in any state that has an impact on elections. There are a lot of other ballot issues on abortion, on a lot of different things, but these are the ones about elections. And I hope that you'll look at that. But we decided to add something to it today. And so we have put together a calendar. It's a resource page. And, look, those of us who put it together are lawyers. So it's not very graphic. It's just the information, just the facts. And maybe we'll be able to put some graphics on it, so it might be a little bit easier to read. But what we did was we wanted to show everybody what are the post-election deadlines in each of the battleground states. And if you look at those, you will see that some of these states have very protracted dates and deadlines after the election. Nevada, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous where, after the election, where you can still receive ballots, where you can still, then it's one of the things that has happened, because when you have unsupervised voting with mail voting, when you vote in person, there's somebody there to help you if you make a mistake. And and let's face it, people do make mistakes. People mark two candidates on the same race, and the tabulator will kick that out. And so then that's a spoiled ballot and they can get another ballot. But when you vote at home and you're mailing in a ballot, these ballots come back and they don't have all the right information. So now then the states have created these processes that go on past election day to cure your ballot. And so there are these ballot curing periods. There are these receipt of ballots, and then the county. So if you look, but we wanted to show everybody, if you wanted to go look at a state and see how long this state is still going to be counting ballots, it's there at votefair2024.com. I say that to tell you about that.
Okay, so Cleta, that's very helpful information. So a little prognostication on your part. If you look at Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, where I've read about this subject in detail in these after election day ballots coming in, whether they're military ballots or not verified, or they're conditional ballots that are reviewed 2 or 3 or 4 days later, a week later, whether they count or don't. What do you think is happening in this election based on this subject? Does it create a question for the presidential election? Bill Howard's going to talk in a little while about the constitutional question you raised about what's the effective meaning in the Constitution of Election Day, and whether administrative rules and regulations can change the definition of the meaning of that day. What do you think's happening?
Well, look, I mean, there are some states, it's not only the post-election, but Virginia has 45 days of early voting. I mean, these states have, I mean, there's these long periods before election day and protracted periods after. I think that if you start looking at these statutes that we've posted, I think people will start to go, that really doesn't make any sense. But, I don't think most Americans were paying any attention to most of these things until 2020 and since then. And we've made a lot of changes in state laws. We have a lot left to do, but let me give you let me give you a couple of three things about, I work in the election integrity space. I watch the political part, but I'm really working on the process itself. And one of the big differences between now and 2020 is that a lot of people are watching. And in particular, so we have a lot of poll observers, a lot of people have gotten involved, they've been trained, so they're out there deployed, watching early voting, watching. Pennsylvania says they don't have early voting, but what they have is people can go to the election office and apply for an absentee ballot, stand there, get a ballot, take it out in the hall, vote it, and turn it back in. That sounds like early voting to me, but so they've had all kinds of problems in the last 24 hours because they don't have early voting, but they do have early voting. And so, but we have a lot of people watching, and then we have a lot of people out voting early, and they're watching things, and they're taking pictures, and they're posting them on Twitter and on X. Excuse me, I can never remember to say that, and other social media. And what's happening is that because it's like now we have an army of citizens, of voters who are just reporting things. They're watching and they're seeing things and they're reporting it. And it happens to be at a time when people are paying attention. So today there were 2 or 3 things that were reported. One of the things that we have raised questions about over the last 3 years are the problems with duplicate voter ID numbers. So in election and the voter rolls, and tried to get election administrators to clean those things up. And we've had some success, but not enough. And today somebody did an analysis. We have a group of people who are volunteers who analyze. They've created their own software programs, and they analyze and look at every day at who has voted and they know who's voted, but they don't know. And states report different things, but Michigan reports who voted every day. And somehow it was reported today, and citizens saw it, and they put it all over Twitter. So that there were like 170,000 more votes than voters who had actually voted, and more than ballots cast. And so people started raising Cain about it on all the social media, and then the media gets it. And guess what? So then it gets called to the attention of the election officials who investigate it, and they go, "Oh, that's a glitch. That was wrong. We fixed it," and they fixed it. That wasn't happening before. There was no citizen oversight of the elections in 2020, and it was until well after the fact. And I have to give the RNC credit for creating a strong legal presence so that they are able to they're able to be more adept at getting into the weeds and getting into the courthouse more quickly. And they filed 2 different suits in the last 48 hours that resolved problems ahead of time. That makes me happy.
Cleety, do you feel, based on your expertise and you're watching so carefully, that this election certification process on election day for president and then for the House and the Senate is going to be a better result and quicker than the previous elections?
I can't say that. I do think that the fact that people are voting in person in large numbers, and the dramatic decrease, there's been a big decrease in the vote by mail numbers, which I think is really good, because the vote by mail processing takes so much longer. And so the fact that more people are voting in person means that on election, as soon as the polls close, then all they have to do is tabulate that. And that gives us an earlier indication. But you still got places like Nevada and Maricopa County. Nevada is basically an all-mail state. And I'm not counting California, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, because they don't count, because they're hopeless. But they're all mail. There's an all mail, all vote by mail. But Nevada isn't all vote by mail. And the problem with Nevada is that if you are on the voter rolls, you automatically get a ballot. So there are literally hundreds of thousands of live ballots flying around Clark County to people who've moved away, who died, who are still on the voter rolls. And that's just a fact. And we've worked hard for a year and a half and unsuccessfully to some degree, but it's really hard to clean the voter rolls because of federal law and because of recalcitrant Democrats.
Keep shining the light on that. Does anybody on the call have any questions for Cleta?
This is Emil. I do have a question.
Okay, Emil, go ahead.
Hi, Cleta. I live in the Old Dominion, and I was curious about your insights on the SCOTUS ruling 6-3 today, that it was indeed legal for the Commonwealth to purge the voter rolls of non-citizens and those who are otherwise disqualified from voting by reason of death.
Thank you for that question. What the Biden federal judge ruled was that they couldn't remove non-citizens. The Department of Justice sued the Commonwealth of Virginia, also sued Alabama for the same thing. Both of the federal district court judges ruled in favor of the Department of Justice. The Virginia appealed that to the Fourth Circuit. The Fourth Circuit refused to stay the opinion, and it was only on the stay. And so they filed an emergency appeal with the Supreme Court, I think on Friday and or maybe Saturday. And the Supreme Court ruled today. They voted 6-3 to stay the decision, which means the lower court had ordered that all of these non-citizens who had self-declared that they were non-citizens. Right. And so the Supreme Court did not rule on the merits, but they stayed the decision, which means that none of those people will be eligible to vote in this election. And that's a really big step forward. We have a lot more to do. I wrote an article this week for the Federalist on the 3 federal laws that really need to be changed to protect and to guard against non-citizen voting. But we'd have to win the House, the Senate, and the White House to get that done.
All right. So, Cleta, thank you very much. If you can stay with us, we're going to look at a video, Emil or Gary. Carol Davis has joined us. I know that Keith D'Amato is on. We have a pre-recorded 7-minute video. So everybody be patient. Just watch this. And David, can you put up that 7-minute video that has Jay Delancey, Brent Bavacqua, and Amanda Shoemaker that want to tell us a little bit about North Carolina and what's going on there, given the devastation as it's affected the voter turnout.
And now we have Amanda Shoemaker. Amanda, you've been delivering supplies to Western North Carolina by mule train. Very simply, in terms of the spirit of these people, are they beaten?
Not even close. No, they're pretty strong. The rumors are true about the Appalachians. Those people don't go down easy. They're in good spirits.
Are they going to get out and vote?
As far as I know, the people that I've talked to, they do have access to vote. They gave me directions and knew how to get there. I believe the line was long, so that sounds like people are getting out there.
Do you know which way they're going to vote?
From the people that I spoke to, clearly are just more of like the volunteer types. And I think they're going with Trump as far as I could tell. They're not really happy with how things were handled. So they're pretty opinionated.
Brett Bevilacqua, you have been a news TV news producer and editor. Do you think that the media has been covering what's happened in North Carolina completely and thoroughly or fairly?
No, unfair. It wouldn't even begin to describe what's going on. Of course, I'm with Amanda, and Amanda every day has given me reports, and it is diametrically opposed to what I've seen. I don't watch a lot of news anymore for various reasons, and but what I have seen, of course, clips. The news will tell you everything's fine. FEMA's helping everybody. Everything's great. Everybody's going to do great. Everyone's getting money. And then when you hear from people on the ground, it's the exact opposite. It is so bad. I can't even stand it anymore.
which way do you think North Carolina is going to go?
I do believe that Trump will carry North Carolina. I'm feeling I'm in a very red area of North Carolina, and you notice there's a swell that you don't see a lot of Harris signs. You certainly don't see a lot of people pushing for, and I'm even crazy enough to think that Trump's ground game here might be good enough to pull up Mark Robinson to win the governorship. I don't think he can do it, but it just feels that way, that it's that strong of a right Republican conservative lean.
Jay Delancey, you are an expert in election integrity, particularly in North Carolina. How are the storm-ravaged counties in Western North Carolina being treated in terms of were the election officials providing them what they needed so these people could still vote?
The election boards in North Carolina are, by law, it's 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And it's almost as if the word went out because that part of the state is heavy Republican. You'd have to be a conspiracy kook to believe what I'm about to tell you, but I believe it, that the Democrats were doing everything they could to take advantage of this situation and disenfranchise as many voters as they could in that part of the state.
As I understand it, they were only allowing one voter location, one early vote location per county. Is that true?
Well, I can't speak to every county.
The ones in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, but no, I don't. They didn't change their plan that they already had in place. But each county had a plan, unless, of course, they lost a early voting location due to the storm. Amanda, I don't know if you were in Burnsville area, but I heard that they lost a voting location and put up some kind of remote facility to do it right there, like a tent or something, which is good. That's what they should have done. The problem in one county in particular, in Henderson County, the original plan was to have one early voting location downtown, which was reasonable at the time. But then the roads went out and there were two pockets of the county were having to leave the county and go around and take an hour or longer to get to the early voting location. So the board members, Debbie Dante in particular, wanted to put in 2 early voting sites there, and the Democrats voted 3-2 3 times. They turned down her request 3 times to go ahead and expand and put them in there. And they made all kinds of excuses. The bottom line is state law. They had to go, and the legislature came in and voted unanimously with a huge bipartisan vote to require one early voting location per 30,000 voters in each county. In Henderson, that means adding 3 more early voting sites. And these other counties, I haven't ascertained what that means in these counties, but it certainly gives Republicans a fighting chance.
Well, who do you think is going to win? Who's going to take North Carolina?
I think I agree with Brett. Everything I'm seeing, call me a hopium addict, but I've just really been seeing some really good signs that Trump is walking away with this. He's going to be in Rocky Mount tomorrow, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. That is an area. A lot of Black people live around there, and I'm so excited that he's going to be there. I'm hoping to get up there myself. But with that, the only question is, will Mark Keith Robinson see? Mark, he has a unique problem that there's 10% of the Republican base that hates conservatives. And Mark was never going to get their vote, and they're not going to vote for him now either. But the question is, will Trump's coattails be broader and be long enough to pull him through? And in 2016, Trump blew through and did. He pulled everybody in, including the governor, including the attorney general and the state auditor, things that had never happened. And then there was a mysterious, we had our 2020 steal. We had it in 2016 when, long after all the polls were closed, and Durham County suddenly found 94,000 ballots that hadn't been counted, supposedly. And lo and behold, it flipped those 3 races. The 3 races that had subpoena power in North Carolina, they flipped. in a red wave year and they all went Democrat, thanks to Durham County. We never got to the bottom of it, but I think it's going to be harder for them to do that this year. So it could be a red wave year that's for real.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the three of you, for Jay and Brent and Amanda and Gary's interview of the three of them. Bob Janetsky, are you there? I'm looking for
I
you.
am. I'm right here.
So you know my question,
Right
what it's
above
going to
you,
be,
Hal.
what do the betting odds makers forecast?
The betting odds have moved very significantly in the favor of Trump. The latest numbers, if you go to Real Clear Politics and kind of look at the spread, it's something like 65% chance of Trump winning and a 35% chance of Harris winning. And those have changed dramatically over time. There was one time when Trump got shot, and it looked, and right after the Republican convention, where his betting odds went way up. And then there were other times when Harris came on that we saw exactly the opposite. But for the past really 2-3 weeks, as people seem to have gotten to know more about both candidates, there's been just a dramatic shift in the betting odds. That's not what we see in the polling odds, which are pretty evenly split. But when I look at the polling odds, I also like to compare it, and so does Real Clear Politics, with what the spreads were and how close the polling odds were in past elections. Because the betting odds have been pretty good in predicting. So the betting odds are saying runaway by Trump. But if you look closely at the polling odds, while they're all neck and neck, there has been a consistent tendency in both 2016 and again in 2020 for the for the polling odds to be way off in the favor of Democrats. Yeah. So this time around, even a very slight lead by Trump, which was what he has now in the battleground states, would, if there's still that hidden vote for Trump, people who don't want to admit they're voting for Trump, won't even tell pollsters they're voting for Trump. That's been the pattern in 2016, 2020. If that's the pattern today, what the polling odds are telling us is that we're going to have a landslide election in favor of Trump. And yes, Paul, your gut feel would be wrong. As many of us have been in the past, when we go with our guts, when we go with our guts instead of the numbers, you can be way off. But anyway, that's my analysis.
Okay,
Hal.
so then, Robert, Bob, as that syncs with that logic, is that the same way the stock market is thinking?
It seems to be. I just cannot imagine, although I guess the way this past couple of years have gone, you can imagine anything, but it's difficult for me to imagine that the tax implications of a Harris presidency would not weigh very heavily on the market. If it so happens that the polls just happen to be right, and perhaps there is a little shenanigans in the election and Harris does get elected, I would not want to be holding stocks on election night or the day after. The tax implications of what she wants to do are so horrendous to the economy that I just would not want to be holding stocks.
In the Wall Street Journal today, there was a challenge to economists, and you are one of the most distinguished, and that's a bipartisan view of your reputation and your record. Why are the more liberal economists siding with Harris's plan, which raises every tax on everything?
Well, these are the exact same economists who told her that the Biden-Harris economic program was going to be great and they wouldn't have to worry about inflation, that it was not going to cause inflation, it was not going to send interest rates higher. So these economists have been just dead wrong. And it's just common for a politician to pick out economists that agree with them.
The leading Democratic-leaning economists like Larry Summers and Jason Furman were dead set against those big stimulus programs and predicting exactly what we got.
Oh, yeah, and
That's right.
I was
Yeah.
on their side too. But the ones that she's talking about, the ones that I guess are dominating the Wall Street Journal, if the Wall Street Journal is supporting her policies, these are the ones who have gotten it wrong.
Right.
But maybe that's because they're all looking for a job.
Could be.
But that's a facetious comment. What about the idea that, well, I don't know, Robert, what's your prediction?
My prediction?
Yep.
For what, the election?
Yes.
Look, I was predicting a red wave 2 years ago. I got that wrong. I predicted a Trump victory in 2020, and I got that wrong. So I'm not making predictions based on that. My prediction based on what I've seen in the betting odds and the polls is that this is going to be a landslide election. But I'm not going to go with my instinct or my gut, as Gary likes to refer to it, because that's been wrong so often in the past. But I do think that there are some statistical reasons to suspect that this election is going to be very different from what the polls are now showing.
Do you have that same view with respect to the House and the Senate?
I really don't. I don't have a good feel for the House and the Senate. If you look at the betting odds, they're all over the place. So it's not as clear cut when you get down to the House and the Senate.
You're very kind to be with us today. Does anybody have any questions for our esteemed economist, Robert Janetsky? Anybody have a question?
Bob, it's Emil. I have a question again. Are you familiar with Polymarket?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wait,
That's a good question.
Polymarket is one, it's not really a question except are you familiar with it? Polymarket is one of those betting odds pages. Everybody can go to polymarket.com and see at a glance what the odds are being given at any time. And the current bet for the House and Senate, in fact, for a sweep, is 43%, which does not seem like amazing odds, but it is the highest of all the odds of all the possible combinations when you take into account Democrat president, Republican House, Republican Senate, and so on. 43% are saying Republican sweep. So those are the highest odds of all the possible combinations.
I would just want to remind everybody that the betting market, and I like that kind of approach to uncertainty, but the betting markets are very thin, and very small changes in sentiment can produce very large swings in percentages. So, but that's just a caveat on the betting markets. So.
And it doesn't take into account the margin of the actual vote of either the electoral or the popular vote, because there are also odds on those. But you could have a wide swing in the betting market over a very thin margin on the vote itself.
Yeah.
Emil, that's a good point. And I thought that the New York Yankees were odds on favorite to win the baseball World Series too. And they still might. Who knows, right? They still might. So let me ask a question of Bill Howard. Bill, are you on?
I am on.
You are a really expert with respect to the constitutional issues. Part of that was addressed with our conversation with Cleta Mitchell a minute ago, if you were on.
I was.
What happens if you get a tie electoral vote? Is that even possible, or is that just a bunch of media hype?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't consider myself a constitutional expert with respect to elections. I do have some fascinating questions. One of them pertains to those scenarios, or a variety of scenarios that are based on the language in the Constitution, which I think are fascinating and troubling. So in theory,
that's the 12th Amendment, right?
Well, there's a few combinations here that, yes, the 12th is part of them, but there's a few combinations here. Everybody keeps talking about the October surprise, November surprise, what are they going to do? If Trump actually wins, what's going to happen? Is there some nefarious plot, etc.?
Oh, that's all garbage.
Well, I understand.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I understand that that's some people's view. I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but here's the thing. I mean, one of the things that is very interesting to me pertaining to the 12th Amendment is that Harris, like Pence in 2020, has the responsibility to, quote unquote, count all the electoral votes. And it's supposed to be done in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And all certificates are supposed to be open and counted.
Right, that's correct.
And the person having the greatest number of votes is supposed to win. So again, a hypothetical tie. The fact that Harris is the one who's making this decision, in most settings in the real world, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, or any a business person, any variety of circumstances, if you have a vested interest in a voter outcome, you're supposed to recuse yourself. Yet she could be the very person who says, yeah, it's me, I won. So there are a few issues there. One of them is that there is not an actual conflict of interest. And I mean, Pence refused to, I'm sorry, he accepted the electoral vote, even though there were high irregularities that Trump had pointed out in Arizona and Georgia, to name a couple. I'm not sure that Harris has I'm revealing some cards here. I don't think she has the personal code of ethics to go down the same road that Pence did. So I have some concerns there, not only for a hypothetical, the electoral college issue, but even more so for, quote unquote, certifying or counting the electoral votes correctly and therefore acknowledging the correct winner. So, it's, again, these are rabbit hole scenarios, but let me ask a question. 6 months ago, if I would have said to you, there's going to be 2 attempts on Trump's life, one of them will be live on video, and it'll just nick the outer piece of his ear, and he'll get up and yell, fight, fight, fight. And then 3 days later, he'll be on the campaign trail. And if I would have told you that Biden was going to do a horrible in a debate and be replaced by the VP without a single vote being cast for this person, would you believe any of that? I think there are potential issues here regarding the 12th Amendment and how that all works. But let's just say hypothetically that Harris says, you know what, it's a tie to your question. It's a tie. I have to recuse myself. Then what? Then it would go to the House and the Senate. And what I find, and this what I'm about to say, I think has some very interesting implications on a few fronts from a constitutional standpoint. The 14th, the 12th, the 25th, the 20th. My understanding, unless things have changed, is that the House and Senate folks are put in place on the 3rd, and the inauguration for the president's not to the 20th, right? So the new House and new Senate are in place by January 20th. So if there's any delegation to the House or Senate, those newly placed candidates make some pretty big decisions under the variety of amendments that I mentioned.
Yeah, January 2nd and January 3rd, the House and the Senate are in place.
Right. So what back to I think the question you posed to Paul or Bob about what's going on congressionally. Those could be as or more important if some of these shenanigans take place, right? So, for example, you've heard a lot of dialogue about the 14th Amendment. No person shall, and I'm reading part of it so that those who are not familiar will know what it says. No person shall be president, ellipsis, president, who have previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the U.S. shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. So, what does engaged mean? And who defines what engaged means? Who decides whether Trump actually engaged in insurrection or encouraged insurrection in that whole J6 debacle? So, should the definition of engage be left to the left? Will they invoke this J6 drum that they've been beating and say, well, he engaged in insurrection and therefore he cannot be president? And then what? Because why is this important? Because under the 14th Amendment, sections 2 and 3, Section 3 says Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove the disability. In other words, if they say you engage in insurrection on January 6th, you're not qualified, 2/3 of Congress can remove that insurrection disability. Being extremely dark and cynical about all this, is there some plan to make sure that there wouldn't be 2/3 majority in the House and Senate so that the Republicans could not take away that disability? Again, I'm not saying any of this is happening or going to happen. It's never happened, but it's here in the Constitution. And I will say, I think the Republicans are horrible at strategy and messaging. And I think the Democrats are exceptional at strategy and messaging. And if someone came to me a year ago and said, hey, Bill, you're not an expert here, but do some digging and what could we do to mess things up between November 6th and January 20? It's right there in the Constitution. It's not like I'm making this stuff up, but
Bill, would the Supreme Court decision on that J6 maybe solve that problem eventually?
It might. That's why I posed the question originally. What does engaged mean?
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, to be honest, I understand there's a lot of constitutional language that is somewhat oblique intentionally. This might be one of them because maybe they anticipated all types of different varieties of potential engagement in insurrection. I don't know, but it's very interesting. And I'm not suggesting it is or isn't going to happen, but it's just some potential landmines out there for those people who think that there's something up behind the scenes.
Well, I just think that your thinking is additive to our conference tonight and very stimulating. Are there any other questions that anyone might have of Bill? Bill, hang on for a minute. I want to let Keith Amato have a few minutes before we go to an open mic. Keith, are you there?
I'm really mainly go by my gut feelings, but I think the one thing that hasn't been discussed tonight, which is interesting, is some of the senior Democratic leaders, and do they really support Harris, and do they really want her to win? I don't know that might be the case, but there is some discussions and perhaps evidence out there that some of this might be going on. So I think that's it's interesting to think about the fact that the opposition to Trump might feel that if he's elected, and that there is even chance at least that he's elected, that they can probably span the 4 years and negate his administration through various means that we've seen in the past. and then it will be a clear court, because if Harris loses now, she won't be around in 4 years to run. So that would open up.
You're saying that the Gavin Newsom wing of the liberal progressive Democrat Party quietly would like her to lose because that paves the way for them 4 years from now.
And not only the Newsom wing, but possibly the Obama wing, and maybe for other reasons, anybody who has some strong feelings towards Biden. I don't think that Biden is very happy with the way he was disposed of. So I just think that that's another interesting factor, and many, many interesting factors that we're going to be seeing in the next week is do they really want her to win? And especially when it gets down to after the vote and the legal efforts that are going on, there's an awful lot of very interesting, strong people that will either be advocating strongly against Trump if he wins, or maybe not advocating so strongly.
Well, I hope everybody was listening, because those were very insightful observations and very beneficial to our call. Now, with 10 minutes to go, I'm going to go this direction. I'm going to open up the mic for everybody that's on the call and just chime in either via chat to get called on, or just raise your hand or interrupt with your voice so we can hear you. Questions for anybody that you've heard speak tonight on the panel, with either questions for them or your own opinion about this election and its outcome. Who I can't see. Is that Bill? Bill, you're on first.
Yeah. So is Cleta still on?
She may not be. Talking about one of the most busy people in this election cycle. She is one of them. So I don't know if she's still on.
Well, let me just throw it out to the group. I appreciate all the effort that's being made, and I think someone said before that there's a dramatically improved. We have a very much improved lie compared to 2020. What I'm most worried about is, we can have all the poll watchers and everything else, but two things. One, there's so many jurisdictions are still using the Dominion voting machines. There's already been reports in a couple of states that people have voted X and it came out when it was printed Y. Number one. Number two is, what happened in 2020, you had Trump up here at 10:30 p.m. and Biden down here, and then at 3 a.m. all of a sudden it went like this and Biden's up here. Who's out there counting, making sure that there aren't truckloads of new votes coming in? You can't possibly watch all of it.
Good question, and I think that there's some answers to that in a minute. Anybody else have any other? Carol Davis. Carol, you're on. Any comments or thoughts?
Yes, to address what Bill just brought up. I work.
That's her world, Bill. So the two of you are simpatico.
Yes, and thanks for everyone on this call for all you do. It's a huge concern. I believe we have unbelievable forces out there with boots on the ground. We are already, what early voting in Illinois started on September 26th. And we started getting reports. We have a war room. We have a coalition across the state with partners, such as the Illinois GOP. If the Democrats wanted to help us, they would be welcome. But for some reason, they haven't knocked on our door. And we have really got a lot of boots on the ground, eyes on every ballot. We've got better training than we had in 2020. Now, I'm not going to be a Pollyanna, though, about this. We have a huge problem in the number of illegals who have been put on the voter rolls. These people will not be showing up in person at your local polling place to cast a vote. Their ballots will be harvested. Most of them don't even realize they've been put on the rolls by the NGOs that greet them when they come across the border. here, sign this, it'll get you food. Here, sign this, it'll get you housing. Here, sign this, it'll get you health care. Oh, sign this one too. And before you know it, they're on the voter rolls. Well, they're putting them up in centralized locations, shelters, hotels, whatever. Vote by mail ballots are being ordered in their names because they're on the voter rolls, and those vote by mail ballots will be cast. That's a huge problem. The UOCAVA, the overseas vote that's meant for the military, is being subverted by left-wing operatives, and so those will be voting. So when Trump said, swamp the vote, too big to rig, he was not kidding. But we're already seeing that in the numbers turn out. So this will be a nail biter. But do know that we are so far ahead of the game than we were in 2020. And the RNC, as of a week ago Friday, still had 182 active lawsuits all across the nation that they were actively working on to prevent the subversion of the voting process. So I hope that helps.
Well, Carol, I also heard from a little bird of mine, a friend in Chicago, not Gary, that you just might end up having a Republican as the prosecutor in Cook County.
Yes, Bob Fioretti is winning a lot of fans. And of course, you probably have seen some of the videos on social media. The Black community is really outraged by the way that the illegals are being given so many benefits, and the Black communities are being deprived. So there is truly a red wave in the inner city that hopefully.
Thanks. So I appreciate you all. And before I give my 2 cents worth and pontificate for a minute as we close, I would like to one more last time. Does anybody have a question of any other the presenters or a comment they'd like to throw into the mix for everybody to think about before we close down? Is anybody itching to say something they wanted to say about what somebody else said or the way things are going in America today? Okay, I get to opine for just a second. It's been really enjoyable for me to prepare. Gary certainly has kept me busy the last week. Man, I wish my wife could appreciate his passion for an anniversary celebration with his wife to give up a call of talented people that want to weigh in to give their assessment about what they think is going to happen in about 6 days in America. But I think Donald Trump is going to win. And the reason I do is because of the drift or the slow but steady exposure that his opponent has had as each day goes by. For each day that goes by, in my view, her failure to show up, her lack of being very willing to talk about what she wants to do besides turn the page for a new future, has created a lot of questions in the center right, center, and center left voter that maybe had a fluffy view 4 months ago or 3 months ago, and they didn't pay much attention that she's never been nominated, never voted on, all this whole process work. But what Americans know this coming week is there's 2 people. One of them is going to be president of the United States, one way or the other, with all the technical problems, all the lawsuits, all the delays that may occur. I think at the end of the day, the momentum and the shift in thinking has 2 elements to it. 1, the economy. Number 2, somewhere between 10 and 20 million people that have gotten in line ahead of the 30 million people that for anywhere from 8 to 15 years have been legally standing in line waiting to come to the United States under the rules. And these people broke the line and got ahead of them. And there's a lot of border states and some states whose ultimate public vote is going to surprise you. At the end of the day, that's one thing. The second thing is that people have decided they've had enough of Washington. far be it from me to be a critic. I used to be there and I understand a little bit about that system. But the fact of the matter is, there's not a skepticism about the economy not working as well as it should, although it's working better than I thought it would. But they're skeptical about Washington, not just the media and the journalists and the press, but about Washington really having the ability to deal with their problems. So they're like, vote them out. And they're looking at Kamala Harris and her running mate, who is as liberal or more liberal than OAC ever thought she could be. I guarantee you that the final swing voters in the 7 key battleground states are thinking in that direction. And that is, I don't think it's someone said in our meeting tonight, wasn't Bob Janeski? Who was it that said it was going to be a blowout election? Emil? No, who said? I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but my assessment is that at least inside of the heartland of America and not the coastal environments of California and Arnold Schwarzenegger or Hollywood's elite, when you've got somebody like Josh Shapiro criticizing Biden's comment on those that support Trump are garbage, and you've got Fetterman saying you'd be surprised at what Trump's support is in Pennsylvania. Keep your eyes on Pennsylvania and on Michigan and on North Carolina. And if those tip the way it looks like they're tipping, then I think Trump is our next president. And I think the House marginally will stay Republican. And by 3 to 5 votes, the Senate will be Republican. That's my 2 cents worth. That's my assessment. And like Bob Janeski said, and Paul McGonigal said, we could all be wrong.
Paul McGonigal, as
Yes,
a former diplomat and international banker, you have been a never Trumper. You would not loan Donald Trump a dime. You would not want to do business with him. You would not want to have dinner with him. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Okay. So you're definitely not on his team. You're not on the Trump train. There are many people who claim that if former President Trump were to regain the White House, that after 4 years, he would not leave. They think that he would stay in office, and they fear that he would become a dictator. From your perspective of loathing the man, do you think this is realistic?
I do not. I think that's has a probability of pretty much 0.
And so where's this idea coming from?
I have no idea where it's coming from. There's a fair amount of Trump paranoia out there.
I mean, Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah. And that's where it comes from, I think, generically. What organizations it might be attached to, I don't know. But that's the mindset that produces that expectation, I think.
We have with us also tonight Paul Valente Jr. Paul Valente is very special in that he is 2nd generation in the Meyers Report Roundtable, which is neat. He is an IT. He's building a career in IT and programming. He's also a 36-year-old millennial. I got the 36-year-old right, don't I, Paul?
37, close enough.
Okay. He's also married only a few years, and he has 2 young children. Paul Jr., you have been a lifelong Democrat and a never Trumper. However, this year you changed your perspective or your view 180 degrees. What happened?
Well, it's not easy to explain because it didn't happen overnight. It was a long, slow process. Just to be clear, I was not a lifelong Democrat. My voting record goes as follows. 2008 was Obama. 2012 was Ron Paul. 2016 was Bernie Sanders. 2020 was Joe Jorgensen of the Libertarian Party. It's hard to explain, so I'm going to do the best I can within less than 2 to 3 minutes. I never saw Trump as a serious person, and I'd been disappointed many, many times. But if I had to go back, I'm a huge Elon Musk fan. RFK fan and Tulsi Gabbard fan. I've been following Elon Musk's companies for about 10 years now. It's been amazing watching his companies grow, following all the engineering details and the decisions. But it doesn't matter what he did. It's almost like there's this AI propaganda machine that they could just hit a button and they can make him look like the worst person in the world.
Talking about Trump?
Elon Musk. And since I started to notice that, they always twist his words, and it was almost like with the flip of a button, they could just get everyone to hate him. And over time, I started noticing that same machine being used, for lack of a better word, a hate machine, being used against Trump. And it would always go something like this. An article would say, "You wouldn't believe what ridiculous person that you already don't like said this time." And most of the time I would just read the top part of the article and go, of course he said that. I already don't like that person. No need to actually go to the source to see if it's true or not, and move on. And over the years that kind of builds up. And I started going back. I remember when I first started looking back and checking sources, it was when they said that he recommended injecting bleach into your arm.
Donald Trump.
Yes, Donald Trump. And that wasn't true. It was based on a real patent of a fiber optic tube emitting ultraviolet light that can kill viruses on contact if put down into the lungs. And that made me go down the rabbit hole. I started looking at the source.
1 second. So what you were saying is when he was talking about bleach, chlorine bleach, he was using that to illustrate a scientifically viable principle that was much more technical than that.
Correct. And since he's not a doctor, he just kind of explained it wrong. But the news knew what he meant, but they decided to misrepresent and skew what he was saying anyway. And over the years, the past 4 years specifically, I started looking at the source of everything he said and comparing it with what they said he said, and realized that they were taking everything out of context.
Paul McGonigal, so who do you think is going to win the election?
Donald Trump.
Paul Valenti Jr., who do you think is going to win the election?
I'd rather be an optimist and be wrong than be a pessimist and be right, but I've got to be real with you. They're going to steal it again, and it's going to come down to the electronic voting machines.
My personal view is I think that Trump is going to win because I think there's too much. I think that it's going to be too big to steal. And I think the big money has already given up on the Democrats and on Kamala Harris. We shall see.